All right, thanks, Jamie. So I grew up in New England, son of a cop, and then I decided to go to the right side of the house and become a firefighter. I actually started in a volunteer department up in Wyoming, real small department, and then went to a big city, Colorado Springs, ended up on the rescue company in Colorado Springs. And then a few years ago, Black Forest Fire actually recruited me and brought me on as their fire chief. So what I wanted to talk about was basically integrating many of the concepts and principles that Echelon Front teaches. So concepts and principles that help us win at all levels, from the task level to the grand strategic level. There's a lot of different levels in between there, and I would even argue there's a couple that go beyond grand strategic level. But as a young firefighter, I naturally wanted everything to be my way because naturally I knew what was best. Wrong. To be successful with the other firefighters and officers, my company, which was a special operations company, it's called a rescue company. We began using a simple two-question approach to everything we did. You can imagine the special operations company were the elite firefighters. So we have massive egos within the company, which actually impacts service delivery because our other companies are not actually requesting us early enough because they don't want to deal with us. So we started using these two questions when we showed up on scenes. And basically it was, is it safe and is it effective? And if the answer to both of those were yes, then we just move forward. We move forward with whatever plan was being presented. We supported and implemented other people's plans regardless. Now keep in mind, those two questions were not, is it efficient? Or is this the way that I would do it? Instead, we listened, observed, and allowed them to influence our tasks and tactics on scene. This allowed all of us, the entire operational team, to move quickly and decisively in solving the issues at hand. By listening and respecting them, it actually allowed us to ask those earnest questions during the operation that might increase the efficiency. Now, admittedly, some of those questions were actually leading questions. We had adopted a mindset of always treating our partners with respect and dignity, especially if we knew that they lacked the knowledge, skills, abilities, and experience that we possessed. They were intimidated by our presence already because of that special operations status. So tact, tone, and delivery was key to winning with these other firefighters all of the time. What we found was by adopting that two-question approach, by being humble and respectful of our partners, we actually increased our overall efficiency and served the public better. The other benefit to this was the better relationship building allowed us to mentor during the debrief and the after action reviews. That method works at all levels because now as a fire chief, I'm still using that simple two-question approach. Recently, we began a campaign to acquire a new fire truck, a ladder truck. Now, this campaign should take us 2.5 years and cost the taxpayers about $1.5 million. Thinking strategically, I knew we needed to get the elected officials informed and involved because it was going to require their approval and their votes. We needed to explain the why. I asked the Deputy Chief of Operations to consider taking the elected officials individually on field trips to show the operational need of this truck. Now, we can all imagine how excited he was at the prospect of taking elected officials on a tour. I didn't do a good enough job of explaining why the field trip would be important. I wanted him to be building those relationships. I had previously seen the value of these types of dog and pony shows to influence the decision-making. Instead, he said he would do a simple presentation at their next meeting. I had to ask myself those two questions. Are the risks acceptable and is it effective? I actually was not entirely convinced that the risks were acceptable. We were essentially going to get one shot at this. And I was thinking to myself, there is no way that this is a good plan. If we're not effective, then both the operations and the finances are going to suffer long term. However, he's my number 2 guy, so I didn't want to undermine him and I wanted to support him. So we went with his plan in spite of the risks that I was concerned about. I did have him do a practice presentation the day of, and with a few earnest questions of my own, he altered a slide or two. However, I never let on to him and he may actually be on this call, so this may be the first that he hears about it. I never let on to him that I was deeply concerned about the risks of not drawing the elected officials into the process. After he made his presentation with that sticker price of 1.5 million, the officials and even the community members that were present had serious questions about the cost of this plan. They all seemed to understand that there was a definite need for the added capability. However, the cost of purchasing and staffing the truck was a major concern. Now, keep in mind, the deputy chief was very invested. Should we say emotionally attached to this plan? It was his plan. And then the question came up, the question that we were dreading. The question was, what about looking for a used fire truck? Immediately, I watched the deputy chief's body language stiffen and bristle. Internally, I felt this was also the wrong course of action as well. However, I didn't show it. Instead, being detached and thinking grand strategically, I knew what the end state needed to be, and I knew we had to draw the officials into the planning. I quickly stood up and interrupted before my deputy chief, who's already a very big, scary looking guy, before he could become more frustrated with this bad plan of theirs. So I simply said that this was an excellent idea that we hadn't actually researched. I told them that we would look at the idea and get back to them next month. In short, I was respecting them. I was listening to them, and I was allowing them to influence us. What we were doing was building and maintaining those relationships with the officials. Now, after every one of these meetings with the elected officials, my general staff convenes and we debrief. During this particular debrief, I can tell you the mood was somber. The team looked like we had lost, that we had lost this opportunity, we had lost this one shot at getting this ladder truck. However, from a detached perspective, I actually saw nothing but great opportunity. I briefed them that all the officials are now engaged in the process, and that we are going to research their plan earnestly and genuinely. Their plan had acceptable risks, and it was effective. All we needed to do was to execute the research, and even if we couldn't find anything, when we reported our findings, they would know that we had listened and respected them. So that was a major step forward. So who did I task? Of course, the deputy chief. I asked the deputy chief to start looking for a used ladder truck. Now, you guys all know what his level of enthusiasm was for this. However, last year, he had attended the muster in Las Vegas with me as part of the medical team, and he understood the power of relationships. So he genuinely dove in earnestly into finding a ladder truck. He wasn't going to be trying to play a game just to get his way. He understood what we were trying to accomplish at a strategic level. And then, much to our dismay, he actually found a ladder truck in pristine condition at a mere fraction of the cost. We immediately flew him to the dealer, which was in another state. He inspected the truck, and he said it would meet our needs for the 8 to 10 years. So his discovery and recommendation was forwarded to the officials, and they appear enthusiastic about this course of action. They're likely to approve the purchase tomorrow night, actually, at a savings of $1.2 million. And they themselves are already discussing how the savings opens up the funding for the additional staffing that we were concerned about. So while it's not official yet, it appears that the plan to help us win, that this plan helps us win, and all we needed to do was detach and ask those simple questions. By doing so, we not only achieved our desired end state, but think of the tremendous investment that we put into our relationship and leadership capital with both the community and the elected officials. By staying humble enough to listen and by being influenced by their plan, we won because they won. And that's about all I have to say about that.
That's awesome, PJ. And we talked a little bit about that. And I know you did a bunch of prep and thinking about this topic today. And I think it's a really good thing to, as a reminder to people, we talk about the first law of combat is cover and move. The crux of cover and move, our ability to proper cover and move, is our ability to build and maintain strong relationships. And people don't prioritize relationships enough. They don't. And yet it is how we ultimately win as a team, how we succeed in getting what we need and accomplishing the ultimate mission. And so this is such a great example of the simple option of going with their plan, allowing someone else to influence you, not only gave you guys some leeway of real resources you can now put back into the program in some other ways, it also helped in building that leadership capital, a really critical component to future being able to work together to solve those problems together. And the things that keep us from doing that is ultimately our ego, because we know what works. We have this plan, especially, I found this at Echelon Front as I started here in my time here, a lot of these processes and programs and things I built myself. And so nowadays I have to really focus myself to recognize that when my team has another way of doing it, it's so easy sometimes for me to jump in and say, no, I've been here for long enough. This is how we do it. Just go run it this way. It seems like the easier step. But ultimately, it doesn't enable me to build that leadership capital with my team. And so we have to step back sometimes and recognize what's the ultimate goal and end state here. That 80% plan that we talk about at Echelon Front all the time is really allowing people, if you've got a 70% plan, an 80% plan, it's not necessarily as good as maybe my 95% solution. But by doing that, you're building that leadership capital, you're giving ownership to your teams, you're enabling them to go and solve these problems. And when you do that, they have a lot more ownership in wanting to see that plan succeed, as opposed to me telling them this is the way it's got to be. We miss out on opportunities that we may not have been able to recognize if we didn't have people on our team pushing back a little bit, recognizing other ways to do things. So I love this idea of this 80% solution, really about building relationships. And when we allow people to influence us, when we go with their plan, when we invest in their ideas, we build that leadership capital. And that is far more valuable than the quick fix that I might be able to institute in the way that I might do something. So love this topic today. Leif, any comments on this idea of the 80% solution?
Yeah, I think what's awesome about this is that who has the 100% solution? The answer is nobody. And we often kind of think that we do, right? And just CJ, or PJ, you're giving a great example of this, of bringing this in and say, hey, look, this is our 100% solution. We got this all fixed up. But even if you bought exactly what you wanted, once you get that in, even let's say it's a new model truck, but there's some issues with the truck that still need to get sorted out, or they have to recall something on there. Like, no one actually has the 100% solution when you're proposing a plan. And if you notice, when Jocko talks about this, he'll normally say like 90% solution. Like, I have the 90% solution as like the max. So this is someone with the most experience, who has all the inside information, has done all the research, because we actually don't know what the future holds. Nobody knows that. So oftentimes when you're digging in on a plan, you're digging in on something that's actually unknown. And so if Jamie's pushing back on something that I'm proposing, then why would I dig on something when I actually don't have a 100% solution? I actually don't know how this is going to go. We're talking about something in the future that we're trying to plan for, whether it's a combat mission, we're planning for an event, whether we're putting in a strategy that we're going a different direction, or if it's a piece of gear or equipment like PJ's talking about for the department. There's no sense in digging in your heels on something like that if you don't actually know what the 100% solution is. And so, because we don't know the future, no one has a crystal ball, and you could get exactly what you want, and it ends up not being what you want. We did that in the SEAL teams all the time, where we demanded some super high expensive piece of gear, and it gets in, you're like, oh yeah, this is awesome. We push up the chain of command to get this thing, and you get it in, you're like, yeah, it's actually not working the way we wanted it to. And so now we got to go back to the drawing board. So expended a ton of leadership capital over what we thought was that 100% solution, and it actually wasn't at all. So just another great example. I think that if the thing that you said right out of the gate, PJ, that I liked is, I thought I knew. And this is the people ask me for advice, like, what's the best advice you give somebody stepping in a leadership position? It's be humble or get humbled, because when you think you have all the answers, nobody has all the answers. So this is why humility is the most important quality of a leader. And so when you approach things from an open mind, if somebody's pushing back, if somebody's asking some questions, if somebody sees something from a different perspective, listen to them, keep that open mind. And as PJ said, allow yourself to be influenced by them, which is going to build a better relationship, as Jamie talked about, so that you can be influenced by them going forward.
What I love about this too, at this example, PJ, is that it shows that like your instinct oftentimes is like, hey, this isn't going to work. That's not going to work. We're not going to be able to find this other truck. Like, this isn't a good path to go down. We're going to waste a bunch of time. Like, that's our ego. We tell ourselves these things all the time. And in this example, you stepped up and said, hey, that's a great solution. You knew that investing in that leadership capital, that relationship was going to be the ultimate end state and really what you wanted to do. But the end result was that you actually found a solution that was better for everyone. You found the truck that enabled you guys to have some massive cost savings, which then ultimately impacts the team even greater by just setting your ego aside to say, hey, I know what's right. I know what we need. And say, you know what, maybe there is something here. Let's explore this earnestly and sincerely and see if we can figure out a middle ground. And ultimately the end state was that you found what you needed. You got your team what they needed ultimately. And there's some additional resources that we can put back to building the team and better supporting the team. So really cool example of that. When we set our ego aside and we do the right thing, and we look earnestly to try and help and solve in what people are telling us to do and following their plans, the end state might even be better for the team as a whole. JP, you're with us in the mobile command. Do you have any comments on this topic today?
I love this topic. And we were just dealing with this out here at the FTX. And, I'm acting as their task unit commander, and they have to brief their plan to me, and I have to approve their mission before they can go out. And, all the tactical Timmies come out and they think they got these great ideas tactically how they're going to come through. And it's like, hey, this is not tactical training. It's leadership training. We're trying to drive that deeper into them. But they had a plan where they're going to split up their teams. And splitting your forces is never a good idea, especially when you don't have the training or the ability to actually communicate. It's a recipe for disaster. And I, with my background and the fact that I'm running this training, could have easily said, hey, don't split your forces, keep them together. And guess what they would have done? They would have kept their team together and been like, okay, cool, let's do that. But instead, I just asked them some questions. I said, hey, if you guys have a squad on the north side of the town and you have a squad on the south side of the town, can you guys properly communicate? Can you actually support each other? The guys will no. I said, okay. Well, if some enemy fighters come in between the two groups, do you feel like you could safely engage those enemy fighters? And he said, no. And I said, well, why? He said, well, our team would be on the other side. I said, okay. What do you want to do? Like, how do you think we could fix this? And he said, well, maybe we just keep the teams together. And I said, I like that idea. I like your idea. You should keep your teams together. And I didn't have to dictate anything. I didn't have to tell him like, hey, as a Navy SEAL, we never split our forces and blah, blah. No, I just asked him some questions. And as we pulled the thread, he saw the answer, and it was his answer. And so when he went back to his team and said, hey, they changed, he's like, we're going to change up the plan. Some of the guys pushed back. They're like, oh, they changed our plan. He goes, no, I changed the plan. And this is why. And he like presented to the group, and the group was like, oh, that makes sense. We should probably stay together. So it was awesome to see it happen in real time. PJ, I love that story. It was awesome. You're driving ownership and working through all that stuff. So that's all I had to add from the mobile command up here running FTXs. I might have to drop off a little early as we jump back into it.
Yeah, and what JP didn't tell you guys is that even when he says don't split your forces in the FTX, they immediately split forces and go opposite directions. We tell them don't run, and they start running. So in times of chaos, you're even more likely to fall to the bad habits. And I think, to JP's point, I love that you said this, JP, when we talk about the 80% solution, the reason this is so critical to let your team run with a solution that maybe isn't as good as the solution you have is that when they come across problems, when they come up against challenges, when they get pushed back from the team, they now have ownership of it. They're now going to be invested in helping to solve those problems and mitigate those issues as they arise, because they're going to feel like this is my plan and I want to see it succeed. Their ego pushes them to want to see that plan succeed. Whereas if it's your plan and you're pushing it and saying, no, we're going to do my plan, when they come up against those hurdles and those challenges, they're far more likely to be like, no, that was Jamie's plan. I don't know. I told you this wasn't going to work. And now there's friction there. So that's the benefit of really allowing your team to take that 80% solution and run, or even the 70% solution and run. PJ, any other thoughts on this topic before we go to questions?
Yeah, just real quick. I think talking about the solution, 100% solution, 90%, all of that. I mean, many of us recently have heard Thomas Sowell's quote, of there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. So if you stay in that detached perspective and you realize you're never actually going to get to the perfect solution, there's always going to be trade-offs. So in this particular story, we traded off a shiny new rig and ended up saving 1.2 million. So, I think that's important to remember is you're actually never going to get the perfect solution. So accept the trade-offs, accept where the risks are at for your organization and move forward.
Well, and to your point earlier, PJ, like that trade-off is far more valuable because of that leadership capital you have now earned. When they had an idea, they had a suggestion, and you went with it, and you stepped up and said, "Yep, that's a great suggestion. Let's go explore that." Not only did you explore it, you found a solution that was within what they were looking for initially. So now you've built that leadership capital, and the next time you need help, you need support, you're much more likely to get it because the last time in this example, you did what they wanted to do. Jocko's talked about this a ton, and I know Leif can attribute to this. When they were in tasking at Bruiser, every time the command would ask, "Hey, do you guys need anything?" Other units would say, "Yeah, we need this, we need this, we need this." And they get to Jocko and he'd be like, "Nope, we're good. Nope, we're good. Nope, we're good." And over time, he just consistently said, "No, we're good to go. We're good to go." So when he actually needed something and he stepped up and said, "Hey, I actually do need something," he got what he wanted because the command recognized that he wasn't asking for things constantly. So when he did ask for something, they were much more willing to listen and support in that. So we can do that in our lives, in our relationships, and in any manner of work that we're doing by just, "Hey, let's go with your plan, your plan, your plan, your plan." So the one time you might need to make an adjustment or a change, you've got support because the people have seen that you've been able to accommodate their plans and give up some of the things that you might want for yourself or other people. They're going to be more inclined to help you down the line. So that leadership value is far more valuable than the shiny new truck.
Yep.
Awesome.